At some point tonight, you might pour yourself a drink, not to get drunk, just to take the edge off. A beer after work, a glass of wine while dinner cooks. That small, warm loosening in your chest as the day finally lets go of you. You probably think of that as a habit, a modern one. It isn't. That pull you feel is older than farming, older than cities, older than your species. It runs back through thousands of generations of ancestors who were, in a real biological sense, drunk almost every single day of their lives. And the reason why is sitting in your body right now, in a single mutation that happened about 10 million years ago. This is the story of how alcohol got into us, long before we ever got into it. By the end, the drink in your hand is going to look like a completely different object. So let me start with the question almost nobody thinks to ask. Why would evolution build a creature that's wired to get drunk? Go back 10 million years, long before anything you'd call human. Your ancestor is a tree-dwelling ape, and the forest floor below is littered with fallen fruit. That fruit is rotting, and rotting fruit does one specific thing. The yeast inside it eats the sugar and turns it into ethanol, alcohol. A biologist at Berkeley named Robert Dudley built a whole idea around this. He calls it the drunken monkey hypothesis. Out in a wild forest, the smell of alcohol isn't the smell of a party. It's the smell of food. It carries further than the fruit itself, and it gets stronger as the fruit gets riper and sweeter. So an animal that was drawn to that scent found more calories than the animal that wasn't. The buzz was never the point. The buzz was a side effect of having a really good nose for dinner. But a good nose is one thing. Your body still has to survive the alcohol. And that's where this stops being about smell and starts being about blood. In 2015, a scientist named Matthew Carrigan did something clever. He rebuilt ancient enzymes, the actual proteins our ancestors used to break down their food, and tested them. He was hunting for one in particular called ADH4, the enzyme that clears ethanol out of your gut. For most of our deep history, that enzyme was almost useless against alcohol. Then, about 10 million years ago, in the shared ancestor of humans, chimps, and gorillas, a single mutation flipped one building block of it. Just one. And that one change made the enzyme roughly 40 times better at processing ethanol. 40 times. Overnight, in evolutionary terms, our ancestors went from being floored by one piece of fermented fruit to eating it all day and staying on their feet. That mutation is still in you. You're carrying a 10-million-year-old upgrade whose entire job is to let you handle your drink. We didn't invent drinking. Drinking was already inventing us. Now, jump forward, almost all the way to us. Here's the story we all get taught about how civilization began. First, humans learned to farm. We grew more grain than we needed, and that surplus let us settle down, build villages, and eventually, with the leftover grain, work out how to brew beer. Beer is the reward at the end. Farming first, fun later. It's a clean story. And the dirt keeps disagreeing with it. In a cave in Israel called Rakafet, archaeologists found stone mortars cut into the floor. Inside them was residue, the chemical fingerprint of brewing, of beer. Those mortars are around 13,000 years old, and they were made by a people called the Natufians. The Natufians didn't farm. This is beer brewed by hunter-gatherers, thousands of years before anyone planted a deliberate field. It's some of the oldest evidence of alcohol anywhere on Earth, and it lands on the wrong side of the timeline. The booze came first, which raises an idea archaeologists now take seriously. They call it beer before bread. Maybe we didn't start farming because we were hungry. Maybe we started farming because we were thirsty. Because once people had a taste for fermented grain, the only way to keep it coming, year after year, was to grow the grain on purpose. Sit with that for a second. The single most important thing our species ever did, agriculture, the thing that built every city you've ever set foot in, may have been driven, at least in part, by the urge to keep the drinks flowing. And it isn't one cave. That's the part that should get your attention. In southern Turkey, there's a site called Göbekli Tepe. Around 11,000 years ago, people with no cities, no writing, and no farms dragged massive stone pillars into place, carved them with animals, and raised the oldest monumental temple we've ever found. It beat Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It rewrote what we thought humans could even do before civilization started. And sitting among those sacred stones, archaeologists found vats, big limestone tubs, some holding over 40 gallons, with chemical traces that point to fermentation, to brewing at the scale of a feast. So picture it. Before towns, before the written word, we were hauling stone the weight of cars across a hillside to build a temple, and brewing beer in the middle of it, almost certainly for the huge communal feasts that got the work done at all. And it's not just Turkey. Go to China to a site called Jiahu. 9,000 years ago, completely independently, on the far side of the planet, people there were fermenting a drink out of rice, honey, and hawthorn fruit. A scientist named Patrick McGovern analyzed the residue and rebuilt the recipe. That's the pattern. Different continents, different peoples, no contact between them. And the moment each one had the means, it did the exact same thing. It started to brew. This isn't a habit one culture stumbled into. It's something the whole species reaches for every single time, the way water finds the low ground. Now, the obvious way to read all this is the cynical one, that our ancestors were just like the worst version of us, that they got wasted to escape, to numb out, to chase a cheap good time, that the whole story of human drinking is really 10 million years of people chasing a buzz. And honestly, part of that's true. The buzz is real, and they chased it. But it doesn't explain the temple. It doesn't explain why people who were one bad winter from starving would pour their precious grain into a vat and wait weeks for it to ferment instead of just eating it. If alcohol were only about escape, it'd be a luxury. The first thing dropped when times got hard. Instead, it sits right at the center of the first things we ever built. So, what was it actually for? A researcher named Edward Slingerland lays out the case in a book called, simply, Drunk. His argument is that alcohol solved a problem evolution couldn't. Human beings are wired to be suspicious of strangers. We guard ourselves, we hold back, we lie, and you can't build a village, let alone a civilization, out of people who don't trust each other. Alcohol cracked that open. A few drinks, and your defenses drop. It makes you talk, laugh, sing, admit things. It makes a stranger feel like a friend, and it makes everyone around the fire feel safe enough to cooperate. Sharing that vat, our ancestors weren't just getting drunk. They were doing something no other animal can, bonding strangers into a tribe, sealing bargains, building the trust that everything else is made of. Alcohol wasn't the enemy of civilization. It may have been one of its foundations, which brings it all the way back to you, tonight, with that glass in your hand. Because none of this stayed in the past. Think about how strange it actually is. Almost every culture on Earth, split by oceans and thousands of years, landed on the same idea, without ever comparing notes. You mark the biggest moments of a human life with a drink, the wedding toast, the funeral wake, the deal closed over a glass, the friendship that finally clicks on the third round. We treat that as just what people do, but it's not a coincidence, and it's not really a choice. It's an instinct 10 million years deep, doing exactly what it was built to do, using alcohol to pull humans closer together, and the machinery is still running. When a Natufian lifted a fermented cup in that cave 13,000 years ago, the same ADH4 enzyme fired in their gut that fires in yours the second you take a sip. The same ancient protein, the same warmth in the chest, the same quiet dropping of the guard you keep up against the world. So here's the last thing, and I want you to feel the weight of it. That drink you reach for at the end of a brutal day, the one you might feel a little guilty about, the one the world keeps calling a weakness, isn't a flaw in you. It's a feature, and it's almost unimaginably old, older than farming, older than language, older than the human race itself. We didn't fall into alcohol. We were built around it 10 million years before we ever had a word for it. So tonight, when you take that first sip and feel your shoulders finally drop, don't think of it as a bad habit. Think of it as a memory. The oldest celebration there is, still happening inside your body 10 million years after it began. Your ancestors were drunk for almost all of human history, and the only reason you're here to judge them for it is that it worked.